Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organisation sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 106 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. This is a second part episode on supply chain excellence with Mr. Rick Sather. If you haven't already listened to part 1 of the episode, you can go back to episode 105 and listen in. Today we'll explore collaboration within your organisation and together as an extended value stream to create stability and continuous improvement within your supply chain. Let's get into the episode. Thanks for catching up again today, Rick. We left off the last episode with the idea of cross-collaborating between internal customers and the broader supply chain. It sounds like from the conversation, Rick, both to get control internally, but then also to get control more on the broader supply chain, the key is collaboration. Do you have those systems and rhythms of meetings and the process around those meetings to create collaboration? And how far does it go? Does it stop at your own doors, or does it go and involve key suppliers and customers also?
Yeah, I don't think this happens very often, in today's world, even though it can. The thinking of the extended value stream and how do we connect together and say, how can it work better? Doing design work or some level of workshops with suppliers, with customers, I've seen be very successful, but also very hard to sustain because there's a lot of change in leadership and people change. And the systems that are in place, the traditional MRP software systems and ordering systems, are not designed with, these different SKU groups in mind, right?
Yeah,
here's my design. I order this way, run the system.
Yeah.
Sales went up, sales went down, change the order, right? So it's the forces against that thinking are very powerful, and there's not enough capability in the technology side of it to support that today. There are some emerging companies that have done some work here that's very good, but it's limited.
I think it would be an amazing step for a lot of these MRP and planning softwares to read Lean RFS. That would be a great step for them to do.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it. I've seen exactly what you said, where the system is hamstrung by the software. And especially when you get software that's not flexible and they charge a fortune to make any changes.
Yep.
It just strangleholds any sort of innovation or continuous improvement.
Yeah. And it's powerful in that if you've got those systems in place without a way to redesign it so that it works with 3 generations of people and role changing, manual systems are very hard to sustain.
Yeah.
Especially in bigger companies. So it's a very key element to the future, I think, of how does this thinking progress on a grander scale than examples of successful companies who've done it.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think, Rick, if I look at it, we've spoken about, first of all, delving into your products and understanding your high volume, mid-tier, low, and then thinking about, okay, well, how can we at least get stability and control on our high volume? And then potentially, what do we do with the mid and the strangers, the odd rats and mice? And then get that rhythm of connectedness and that system as a company to be able to coordinate and collaborate cross-functionally to do a really effective form of S&OP or integrated business planning or whatever you might call it.
Yep.
But where you're looking at products in your different category, not applying the one brush across the whole thing. And then potentially you could go to the extended value stream, ad hoc when needed for massive innovation or ongoing. I've actually seen one of the world's major miners through COVID do that extended value stream connection. They actually set up like a toolbox or a huddle with key suppliers and integrated them as if they were their own people and their customers, and just dramatic outcomes, just because it created that team, which was, it was the extended value stream, and they were able to work together to handle disruption and challenges across that, which was really quite amazing. I've also seen an egg farmer do it. So, a massive big egg company in Australia, they won't mind me mentioning McLean Farms. They, on a disruptive position, set up a weekly or bi-weekly toolbox, they called it, with key suppliers, and drove dramatic improvement.
What's good about that is, in a world where our ability to communicate, the tools we have to communicate are exponentially greater than they were just a year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, we're inherently still not good at communicating and connecting the right things together. So having that in place with a structure for, because demand profiles do change, right? As a matter of fact, it's probably changing faster now than it ever has, with consumers buying in different ways. I'm buying more online now, or I'm adjusting here. And just think how the pandemic affected that. So putting stability in does not mean you forget about it and say, item one is still selling 1,000 units a week. 10 weeks from now, it's still selling 1,000 units a week. 100 weeks from now, it's still selling. They might be gone in 100 weeks. So you have to continually monitor the dynamics of that portfolio's of your product sales, so that you can understand what's changing, and then how do I adjust? And how often are the suppliers clueless about those shifts that occur? Their orders just start changing, and they're like, it seems like this has gone up a lot, or this one's gone down a lot. I wonder what's going on. We know these things, but we're not communicating well.
Yeah. Seems like, Rick, most companies just rely on email, bomb out an email, and that's my communication. It's yeah. Whereas what are your thoughts? Like, I guess I've seen companies do that. Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx, Huddle or Toolbox at a frequency.
Yeah, there are some, there's some portal type activity out there that some companies are doing to share more information with suppliers and customers. So I think that's good. I think some of this technology, in my work that I get to do now, I had experience with almost every platform. And so the ability to connect and engage, it's just, how do you structure it? Like, where integrated business planning or sales and operating planning processes are typically internal. What I think you're describing is, how do you make that more extended?
Yeah.
How do I think about that? Now, if I'm a customer, I better be a really big supplier for me to, I can't engage that way with very many customers. So how do I have integrated business planning between a customer and a supplier, whether it's, I'll say, a retail customer with a manufacturer? Similarly, with if I'm a customer of a material or ingredient supplier, again, how big am I? Right. So these dynamics all come about, and what ends up happening is they all fall apart because the dynamics don't work. So in my personal world, I can get an app to almost engage me easy with many things, and it's very easy. I think there's a gap in communication, supply chain simplicity type tools that aren't designed in a complex way. They're designed with, how do I get what I want when I want it, from my supplier or customer in an easy way.
Yeah.
And allowing me to do it in a way that's convenient for me. So I think that has some future potential for it.
Yeah. Create transparency.
Yes.
Yeah, that's neat. So there's some,
not with a very challenging implementation, right? So if I, on the personal side, get an application that's on a phone, there's no like startup implementation project. I install it, and if I can't figure out how to use it in a few minutes, I probably don't keep it.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of thinking, I think, that we need to build into some of the supply chain management.
That's awesome. So when you've got economy of scale and suppliers, which I guess there's another conversation around that, isn't it? You can have this high collaboration, even face-to-face virtually, right, going in that collaborative huddle or toolbox or scrum, or even integrated directly into the integrated business planning, depending on the scale, suppliers and customers. But then there's another path, like you said, of what can we use in technology to create a simple, transparent, integrated system that works more broadly.
Exactly.
There's a startup opportunity for someone.
Yes, it is.
Well, especially when you think of the pain that's happening around the world. Like, it's probably one of the top 3 pains. Well, no, let's say top 5. There's a lot of pain in the world right now. But let's say it's probably one of the top 5 pains in the world right now is supply chain disruption.
Yeah.
And variability.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's my stuff, right?
Yeah. Or can I get the stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's massive. Rick, what do you see stops organizations doing what we're talking about? Like you and I have spoken about, it's one of the top problems right now. There's some techniques and approaches people can use to get control relatively quickly and easily. What stops organizations doing this?
I'd say first, in many companies, the grind of running the business is very time consuming in itself. So this ability to break away from the fray of running the business every day to say, how do we do it better, takes leadership, thinking, and support to make happen. So it's tough if you're in a smaller company, right? Let's say you're growing fast, or you're not that big where you can say, well, I'm going to bring someone in to do this. So it's different. But if the company's emerging and getting big enough, how do you start to create that resource or thinking and leadership that does? And I also think today's environment has a lot of people changing between companies. So if I'm trying to build stability and someone new comes into a role that's either very critical, or they're in a role that's in part of the implementation or execution of the supply chain, and they bring a different viewpoint, that it takes a lot to maintain that. So it's a difficult dynamic. At the end, it usually comes down to all about people, and how that's a big barrier from my perspective is that, and even in companies that have had high success, leadership change and a different mindset can change how that plays out. So it all comes down to people usually in these questions for that kind of thinking.
Yeah. So I really hear you talking about leadership people and frontline people, but a key aspect, I guess, reading between it is, how do we lead a great culture so that people don't want to leave?
Yep.
And then how do we lead also a systematic thinking that's actually looking at the broader extended value stream of our business to really get control and performance? And then finally, how do we have succession planning or some sort of great hiring approach so when we do have a change, the whole thing doesn't get disrupted with a critical leadership change?
Yeah. Fundamentally, if you have a stable environment and operation, you've got clear standards that are followed. And if you have a problem, it's a deviation from a standard. Building that discipline is hard to do. Sustaining it's really hard. So getting to that point where you've got a process that's being monitored, and how do I know that it's working the way it was? I'm working with a company right now, and it's a very simple thing that we're starting with. It's a basic thing to say, if we can do this, then we can build off it, and build that understanding. This is at the line level, right? Or the lead level on an operating floor, and then all the way up. And, systems atrophy if you don't manage them, right? So that whole dynamic is very difficult, and it's not glamorous, right? Am I checking on this thing to make sure it's being done the right way is the least glamorous thing there is. It's one of the most important aspects of, improvement is, how do I know I'm doing things the way I should be? And how do I measure that? So it takes a lot of energy and thinking to do that, first of all, and then maintain it. But once the engine starts working, what I tell people is, if you get more people involved in problems that you're dealing with now are being dealt with at the line level, at the operator level, in the floor, and they understand the process well enough to go, oh, here's an opportunity for me to do it, that's when it starts really coming together. But it takes a lot to get that in place.
Supply chain disruption and chaos, it is such a common thing today. Creating a future which is calm, where processes flow and continuous improvement occurs every day through engaged, motivated team members is an ongoing journey. Employee morale, unfortunately, is on the decline, with turnover on the increase. Turning this around is a big effort, but it can be done and often requires support. The Enterprise Excellence community has been designed to provide people leading excellence journeys with an organisation support each month from one of our global experts for an hour who will call in via a Zoom meeting, and then also via peers within common industries where we can collaborate in small teams and get help from each other for the second hour of the community meeting. The community is taking on new members. If you're interested, please reach out. You can go to the enterpriseexcellenceacademy.com/contact to apply. It's for people practicing or involved in really playing a big part in these journeys, and it's all about helping each other create that better future. When I look at a lot of the images of the Toyota house, and I have to say a lot of them because you see so many different images and what's right and what's not, but the bulk of them have the foundation of quality and Hajunka, right. Or Hayunka, I don't say it right.
Yep.
But, that is where your works, a lot of the work sits that we're talking about, isn't it? It's that foundation that then from that rock solid foundation, you can build excellence. But I see that if you don't have that, it's like you're building on quicksand. Everything's just going to keep cracking and falling over.
Yeah. And Ian certainly talked about this aspect of firefighting. And, I get to see a lot of that now as I work with companies. And it's a question of how do you break that pattern? And so if you're asking someone to get engaged in improvement and every day they show up as a fire drill, it's pretty hard to say, well, you should be doing this or think about this. So fundamentally, it comes back to what we first talked about. How do you start to build some stability so you've got predictability, reliability? It's what Ian called building economies of repetition. So if I can do the same thing in a repeated pattern, I automatically get better at it because I do it, right? But if it's also predictable, so if I know every Tuesday I'm changing over from this product to the next product, and it's every Tuesday, well, now I can have the resources there to do it well. The people who work there are familiar with it. They know how to do it well. The same thing goes back in the supply chain. So if you work with your customer, your supplier, and say, every Monday, I'd like this truck to come. I'm aware of some companies that have taken an approach of, even if I don't fill the truck, I want that truck to come every Monday afternoon, whether it's full or half full, because I know that predictability is going to help that whole thing. So that's the hard part is you got to start from that. And how do you break that mold of firefighting that exists in so many places today? And it's even worse now with all the supply chain disruptions that people are facing.
Yeah. And Rick, with talking to you too, what's come to mind, like I've got a big background in Agile. So I do a lot of work in Scrum and Agile too. And a lot of people hear that word Agile and they're like, oh, that's what we've got to be, Agile, right? Let's just do stuff. And it's like, no, what Agile and Scrum are is they're actually a very systematic, quality focused, capacity and demand, everything we're talking about approach.
Yeah.
So you get calm and stability in a development team or a project team that then allows them to win and succeed ongoing and build that dopamine hit of winning. And then they get faster, but it's built on a foundation of quality, process, and Hayunka or capacity and demand leveling type techniques that Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber have developed. So even in that buzzword, because what you get out of that is agility. But a lot of people don't understand that the IT world has used exactly what we're talking about in a structured, stable approach to create stability and a foundation on which they've achieved agility. But everyone thinks about it the other way around. No, you just got to do stuff. Well, that's not what's happened in the IT world. There's a level of structure to it and approach.
Okay. That approach that you just described, just do things is very prevalent. And I think from a broad, even university education perspective, this aspect is not understood, not taught. So, people come into an environment, they work in that environment, that's just how things are. So when someone comes and said, you know what, we should first start with some level of stability and follow a quality process, then it makes you predictable, reliable. In operations, I call it boring. Then you can be really agile.
Yeah.
So I would agree 100% that it's not, if you come in with a mindset, and even if you took RFS and said, we want to run the same thing the same way every day, you're going to lose the battle at the end, because the desire for new things or the ability to be flexible isn't going away. So you have to think about it in the broader context of, how do I build, if I have 1,000 items and I can build a stability around, on an item level, 100 of them, that's a lot better than 1,000 of them being whatever.
Yeah.
So it's the people who are in supply chain not getting wrapped up in, I need a plan for every part, and I mean a plan for every part down to the millionth one, can get lost in that as well. So it's this balance of, how do I create a base that I can build off of and be predictable, reliable, and just run it very well in my whole business, so I can be more flexible where I should.
Yeah. It allows you to see the forest for the trees, which is brilliant. Rick, what would be your enterprise excellence 2-minute tip for someone, a leader or someone in supply chain or supply chain management, looking to try and improve in this area of expertise you've got?
Mm-hmm. My first tip I would talk about is, you have to think about what's my current condition? Where am I at? And what I mean by that is, am I servicing my customers well? What's my quality performance? What's my balance sheet look like? Do I understand my current condition, including how I might measure it? Where do I want to be for the business? And assessing that gap. Then from there, you can ask yourself, okay, now what can I do to close that gap? So, I at times get brought in by companies to say, come help us assess the situation. And it really is kind of looking at, where are we? What's reality today? And understand that gap from where I want to be. So it's just a strategy, right? Approach to understanding those dynamics to where I want to be. Then the question is, all right, if I understand my gap, what's my approach for closing that gap? Do I have the knowledge in my company or myself to close that gap? Is it pretty straightforward? Do I need help? Do I need to bring someone in to do it, whether it's into the company or from outside? I think it depends on the dynamics of what that specific thing is. So, if you're not meeting your customers' needs, typically that's a good starting spot, right? If you can't serve your customers, what do we need to do differently to serve our customers and closing those gaps? That would be my point of view. Second thing I would say, as we talked about earlier, is, do I have a design for how I want to run my supply chain for the business? If I do, great. Then the question is, am I running as my design would want me to do? And if I am not, then I have problems to solve. If I don't have a design, that's where you want to step back and go, what should be our design? And there's a lot of different approaches depending on the nature of the business that you're in, the nature of your products, the nature of your customers. So it's not one size fits all. It's not like, here is the design. It's what makes sense for that environment. And then the third thing I would say is just constantly being curious. And do you have an improvement mindset in your company and in your supply chain and operations to say, I always want problems exposed so I can solve them and get better? Any place that has, it's the old no problem is a problem aspect, but as a leader, am I curious enough to ask the hard questions and go, am I doing what I need to do to get better every day? Not just at the line level in my job. Do I know enough to be? So those would be my 2-minute initial aspects for initial focus.
Thanks, Rick. That's awesome. It really applies a thinking and a system approach to taking the journey that people can then achieve what you've been talking about through the show. That's really good. Rick, what's been a recent insight for you? What's been something that you've learned recently that you didn't know before?
The recent issues with disruption in the supply chain are very, very challenging. And even for me, where I believe in the aspect of you have a base that you can design around and operate that way, run your business that way. There are times where disruptive things might happen where you cannot just put blinders on and say, well, I'm going to keep doing that. I may need to adjust. So sometimes that looks like, how do we deal with this? We might not run to design for a while because we can't, and we need to take this approach with how am I going to get back to that as time goes on? And so that would be one thing. And then I'd say my second thing I'd highlight is a personal learning, and it's an approach I try to take as I work with people is a lot of improvement teaching is very prescriptive on this is the way, without the context of the situation for that culture of the company or that environment. So I have personally had to adapt and say, this is something that would be very helpful for this company, but it's not going to work in where their current situation is. So how do we, use the same mindset and go down the right path, but not be too prescriptive or too, I'll call it playbook oriented on here's the playbook we run. That's what I've learned personally as I've worked with more companies now versus, being in companies, in one case I worked for many years. So I knew how things worked there and how do we move in a forward direction. That's not the same in every company.
Now you've got different cultures, different people, different legacy systems. Like it's,
absolutely.
Too true. That's a great insight to share for any consultant or business improvement professional out there, Rick. That's full marks there, mate. Totally agree. I've been through that journey myself. Rick, how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more, get some help? They do that gap analysis and they're like, okay, this is a gap. I need to bridge it. I don't have the capability. I need some help.
Mm-hmm. LinkedIn is a good way to reach out to me. I'm pretty active in my monitoring of that. So it would be a way to reach out as well. I'll also give my email address to you right now, and it's old school Rick Sather at AOL.com.
Thanks, Rick. That's great. Well, Rick, mate, thank you for writing Lean RFS with Ian and helping me and helping so many in the past. And thanks for everything that you're doing going forward, mate, to help create a better future. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate the time and the opportunity. This was great fun. Thank you.
Cheers, Rick. Bye for now, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
If you are part of an excellence journey within your organisation and are keen to gain support from our global experts and your peers in relevant organisations each month for a few hours via Zoom, it's a very short, sharp approach. Please like, subscribe and share this podcast to help each other gain insights and create a better future. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, create stability where you can first. Rick's focus on understanding your products and focusing in on the high volume items that make up a lot of your turnover is a great approach. This allows you to take control in a key area and use the Lean RFS techniques to create flow, save time, and then drive more improvements. My second key takeaway is the importance of bringing the value stream together to improve and continue to hone the supply chain at least each month. Our discussion on considering this on an extended supply chain or value stream approach had some great insights for me. If this is possible for your organisation with key suppliers and customers and doing it in a systematic way, you can create amazing outcomes in innovation, improvement, and ongoing performance of the whole system. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Rick. Thanks for helping us create a better future. Bye for now.